The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
So on our Thursday Dialogue this morning, we are discussing foreign policy and what kind of concessions we should be prepared to make as South Africa in order to amend or mend our ties with the US, especially now that we have a special envoy to the US, and that's us hoping that they're going to accept him there. I'm already hearing from some people who, how do you say this without compromising people? I'm already hearing from people who are close to the situation that there are already questions being asked about this man, and whether or not the key people he needs to be meeting with in the US are going to agree to meet with him, given the views that he's made in the past. And, I've seen people also put up what, the proposed ambassador to South Africa, the US ambassador to South Africa, and what he said about Donald Trump. This is not a competition about who has said what. It's not. This is about South Africa dealing with a presidency or an administration that appears to be hostile, at least towards this country. So anything that you do is going to be questioned. So when you are going to appoint someone as an ambassador, you've got to be damn sure that that person is going to tick the boxes. Some boxes you may think are ridiculous and are selfish on the other side, because which other politician has not said any bad thing as an activist? So, of course, what Jonas has done is normal. That's what happens. He is now occupying a particular position as a special envoy, and that's what's going to guide those interactions. But we are dealing here with uncharted waters. We are not dealing here with an administration that's just going to understand that. Do you understand that? It matters what kind of person you appoint as an ambassador, as a special envoy. It matters what those people have said. It matters how they've positioned themselves, because you are dealing with an administration that is always going to try and find something wrong with every move you make. So we've got a special envoy now. He says he's ready for the job. There's a huge task ahead of him. What does he need to do when he gets there? Who does he meet with first? And what kind of concessions, if any, does he need to agree to as he starts with those meetings? And that's if really he will be meeting with the key people he wants to meet with. So you can share your thoughts with us on 011-883-0702. WhatsApp's on 072-702-1702. The presidency I saw yesterday defended Jonas as a special envoy. Of course, following that reemergence of the remarks that he's made in the past about President Donald Trump. And the presidency has said that they believe that, Jonas's remarks is actually, those are remarks that he made as an activist. And they don't believe that those will get him into trouble with Washington. Jonas himself has said that, well, I was an activist when I made those remarks and I know what I'm doing now. There's another thing now that's a bit of a concern, because Jonas chairs the MTN board, right? He is a non-executive chair at MTN. MTN has got investments in Iran. You know how the US feels about Iran. So is that something maybe that they're going to use also as an excuse not to give this guy our special envoy audience? Your thoughts, please. We've got Tembisa Fakude, who's a senior research fellow and director at Africa-Asia Dialogues, joining us now. Tembisa, thank you so much for joining us for this chat. Good morning.
Thanks for having me, Clement.
We also have Dr. Emmanuel Matambo, who is a research director at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Dr. Matambo, thank you for also joining us. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Clement, my fellow panelists and your listeners. Thank you for the kind invitation.
Tembisa, let me start with you here. And I want to start off first with just Jonas. I was saying earlier on that, we're dealing with an administration here that's always going to find something wrong. And I think that's why the president is taking his time, even with an ambassador, because they want to make sure that they get the right person whom the US is not going to find fault in. And I think that's going to be quite a tall ask. What do you think of Jonas, given what we know now? Do you think this is someone America accepts and opens doors to for any conversation as we try to mend our relations?
Well, I think we'll have to wait and see. There hasn't been much said from the United States regarding Jonas, but he's quite an accomplished politician and a professional, and hopefully he's going to further the interests of South Africa in the United States. But it's also going to be hypocritical for Donald Trump to hold Tembisa Jonas accountable for his past statements, notwithstanding that Marco Rubio, for example, and J.D. Vance have said much more harsher statements against Donald Trump. I mean, J.D. Vance went to an extent of likening Donald Trump to Hitler.
Yeah.
So these are statements that were said in the past, and hopefully they're going to be overlooked. But again, you know, South African government tends to do this kind of very careless mistakes. Obviously, Tembisa Jonas was not thoroughly vetted, and if he was, these statements would have at least been taken into consideration. He said these kind of things, and knowing the sensitivities and the thin skin that Donald Trump has, one would have expected that the president and the government of South Africa would have taken that into consideration before confirming Tembisa Jonas as a special envoy.
Yeah, and I've heard even some in the presidency saying, there are people who work with Trump now who've said terrible things about him. But that's not the point, because Trump doesn't care much about that. But Trump has a mission with us. And the mission that he has with us is to put pressure somehow in some of our foreign policy positions. And he doesn't care much what Tembisa Jonas, who's a businessman in South Africa, has ever said about him. But if he can use that as an opportunity to put pressure and to send a message, that's exactly what he will do. And for you, Dr. Matambo, what do you think of this choice as a special envoy? And do you think that it works to send a special envoy first to sort of set the ground for an ambassador to come through? Is this the way that it could help us as we try to mend these relations with the U.S.?
So just to pick it up from what Prof. Fakude has said there, yes, obviously there are a lot of things that have been said about Donald Trump because he's notoriously divisive. But when it comes to taking the steps of appointing an envoy, first of all, before an established ambassador to the United States, I think this is the right step because we have to be realistic about where the relationship between South Africa and the United States is at the moment. It will probably be more of an embarrassment or a diplomatic fallout if we were to send an ambassador only for him or her to be rejected out of hand by Donald Trump, considering what happened to former Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool. So this is a necessary, I think a convenient step, a realistic step on the part of the president. Now, when it comes to the person itself of Mr. Jonas, I've read already after the news came out on the 14th of April, the National Review, which is a conservative publication in the United States, said a lot of negative things, so to say, about Tembisa Jonas, implying, so to say, that his mission, whatever it will be, is dead on arrival. Solidarity Africa Forum have said the same thing, almost uplifting, reproducing what was published in the National Review. But I think, Clement, fundamentally, we have to look at Donald Trump's relationship with Africa in general, and South Africa just taking the backlash of much of that because it is Africa's biggest economy. This is a president who was in power for 4 years between 2017 and 2021, and not once did he even set foot in Africa. And we have noticed also some of the unsavory things that he has said about Africa. So South Africa takes its attention in the United States in terms of Africa's estimation in the Trump administration is highlighted precisely because of South Africa's imposing economy on the African continent. And by the way, we do not have to forget the fact that Donald Trump is surrounded by South Africans, white South Africans, I should specify that as well, who have their own vested interests in traducing or presenting the African National Congress in very bad light. We look at Elon Musk because of the influence that he has, but Trump has other South Africans around himself. I can name Joel Pollak as being one of them. For example, we have the people who took part in starting Pearl Power. So some people also are interested in the media industry in America who are surrounding Donald Trump, and they might as well be feeding him some of the information that will make Jonas's mission more difficult than it should be ordinarily.
Yeah. Tembisa, I mean, obviously Mcebisi Jonas has to now embark on this new role. He must navigate just the complexities of international diplomacy. Should there be a willingness to compromise or make even some foreign policy concessions? And I wonder what those then could be. I mean, for instance, let's look at the relationship with Iran. When the ANC was meeting with some, Iranians was it a month or so ago, there was a big hoo-ha. And there was a lot of criticism that how dare you do that knowing how Trump feels about Iran. I mean, we're a sovereign state. Trump is friends. If he goes and meets with North Korean leader or whoever, South Africa doesn't say, how dare you meet maybe with someone that we don't agree with. But Donald Trump doesn't like Iran. And in fact, this has been used many times as a reason why our relationship are so strained. So must there be a willingness to cut ties with Iran or to halt the campaign against Israel? What should we be willing to concede on? Tembisa?
What I don't think we should
Your line is breaking there, Tembisa. I'll come to you. Maybe we'll try re-establish that line. Dr. Matambo, let me ask you to respond to that question, and then I'll get Tembisa to come in as well. Should we be willing to make concessions in as far as our foreign policy is concerned? Because I honestly think that's the only time that the Trump administration is going to listen, is when we are saying we're willing to talk and to make some changes. But what does that then say about our sovereignty if it's just open to being influenced so easily by another country like that?
South Africa is really walking a very difficult line here. Should it compromise its foreign policy, or should it compromise its methods of going about foreign policy? For example, you highlighted the importance of Iran, and I guess we were going to talk about Jonas's position at MTN as one of those sticky points. I would rather myself refocus the light on Israel, by the way. South Africa's stance on Israel, taking Israel to the International Court of Justice, and how that, by the way, conjured up evoked this bipartisan. It was not a Republican thing, by the way, rejection of South Africa's case at the ICJ. It was actually bipartisan Congress rejection before even Donald Trump acceded to the presidency last year. Now, why was that compounded when Donald Trump came? Because remember, when we look at Donald Trump, I think America's foreign policy, trade policy, and everything that is happening at the moment is all resting on the shoulders of Donald Trump as a person. If you look at Marco Rubio, for example, there's some of the stances that he has been taking now, not the stances that he took before, but he has to take the stances that align with Donald Trump's personal interests. Now, who are Donald Trump's biggest funders apart from Elon Musk? Miriam Anderson. She was actually one of the most prominent funders of the Trump campaign for 2024. And not only that, she's also a stanch believer, a stanch follower of Israel and whatever is happening between Israel and Palestine at the moment. So that goes right to the heart of Trump's personal interests. So whatever South Africa stands against in that particular fact, it puts South Africa at a diametrically opposed position from where the United States is. So it would be difficult, though, for South Africa to walk back its principles, because then it will mean whatever South Africa has discussed, whatever the African National Congress as a political party has believed in, can just be washed away with. I read an article co-authored by Greg Mills. I think it was in the Daily Maverick, where they said South Africa does not have foreign policy principles. It just says according to whoever gives it the most importance, so to say, or flatters it. I think that would be very problematic if it were to compromise on everything. There are principles on which South Africa should not compromise, such as a free Palestine with people that are not living under a modern day apartheid. That obviously cannot be compromised upon. But there are certain methods, for example, of foreign policy, those then you can debate on.
Yeah, let me bring in now Peter Fabricius, who's our foreign policy analyst. Peter, thank you so much for for also joining this conversation. Let me have you have a bite on that question as well. Just, the U.S. approach now, obviously, well, at least it appears, it's to isolate these nations that it perceives as not aligned with its foreign policy objectives. So, yes, it's okay for us to send an ambassador there, send a special envoy there, but do we actually have a plan? And what's our plan? Because getting to the U.S. and saying, we're not doing anything about ICJ, we're not moving on our allyship with Iran. If we get there and we just say we stick to what we've always stuck to, then I don't know if that's going to help us mend these relations.
Yeah, look, we face a really serious dilemma, as your other panelists have pointed out. I mean, I personally think there's quite a lot wrong with the ANC's foreign policy, and one of the issues with it, I would have to say, is that they're insisting on a monopoly on foreign policy, despite the fact that we now supposedly have a GNU where, all issues, including foreign policy, are supposed to be, agreed on by consensus. Anyway, so there's I think there's certain foreign policy issues that they could concede on. I mean, it's interesting to me that just this week, Jim Risch, who's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, issued a statement once again condemning South Africa because it's now turning up the pressure again to kick Taiwan out of Pretoria, force it to close its office in Pretoria and move to Johannesburg, which is completely unnecessary. I mean, Taiwan has offices like that in Moscow and in New Delhi and, Brasilia, amongst our BRICS partners. And there are other issues. Russia is not such a big issue anymore because, Trump is now sort of, in some ways, probably in many ways, closer to Putin than to Zelensky, what he clearly is. But it's still our position on Russia refusing to condemn them for the invasion does still irk some Republicans, so that isn't helpful. But on the principal issue, I mean, I think the principal issue in all of this is probably our taking, Israel to the ICJ on genocide charges. And I mean, South Africa is not going to concede on that. So one wonders whether any other foreign policy concessions are really going to make a huge difference.
And what do we do though, Peter? Because some people argue, and let me read you the tweet, in fact, because it links to the question I want to ask. Bambata on Twitter says, Clement, the president got it absolutely wrong, even with Jonas. Mending relations using a controversial character is just short-sighted, but also with Trump, diplomatic rules do not apply. So if diplomatic rules do not apply with Donald Trump, then how should we be approaching the fixing of the relations with the U.S. without also looking weak? Because you also don't want to go and start conceding to things that you don't really want to concede to, but because you want to appease the U.S., but it compromises us and our standing in the world. So how do we do it? How do we balance the two?
Yeah, with difficulty, obviously. I mean, as I said, there's some issues, some foreign policy issues, I believe. I mean, I think we should drop the attempt to boot Taiwan out of Pretoria. I think we should also, that might already have happened. I get a sense that it might have happened already. There's this crazy idea of renaming Santon Drive as Laila Khaled Drive, which Nomvula Mokonyane very, clearly indicated was a way to try to embarrass the US by forcing it to change the letterheads on its consulate general in Johannesburg, which is in Santon Drive, and so on. So we can start making some of those concessions, which I think should be done anyway, because I don't think they're good positions. The other thing, and it's not quite clear what irritates Trump most, because if you look at his tweets or whatever, Truth Social posts, it kind of varies. He's got a big focus on the Expropriation Act and his notion, completely distorted and exaggerated that that there's like a campaign of genocide against white Afrikaners and so on. But maybe there's some need for fine tuning the Expropriation Act to make clear that in what circumstances, for example, you can have expropriation without compensation. Hard to say whether any of these will make, Trump is a is a very hard bargainer, as we know, and he demands maximum return for any concessions he's going to make. So, but that's worth an attempt, it seems to me. And then Vincent Magwenya, the president's spokesman, mentioned some weeks ago already that look, AGOA seems to be dead in the water, and we need to go and talk about a bilateral trade deal. Something about access to critical minerals and so on. That kind of thing is a possibility. I mean, as I said, it's very hard to say what might work, but those are the kinds of things perhaps that are worth a shot.
And I wonder what that minerals deal would have to look like. I'll get Tembisa and Dr. Matambo to respond to that after the latest in Eyewitness News headlines. It's 11:30.
The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
24 minutes before 12 o'clock on our Thursday Dialogue this morning, we are once again talking about relations between South Africa and the U.S. We now have a special envoy to the U.S. in Jonas, but do we actually have a plan? And what do you think should be our plan? I'm interested in your thoughts on 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. Tembisa and Dr. Matambo, I want you guys to weigh in on the issue of perhaps using minerals as part of our plan to appease the U.S. and chat to them. I'll start with you, Tembisa. Do you think that will work? I do remember that in February, was it in February when President Trump's administration raised an interest in developing the mining sector in Africa? And I remember he also signed an executive order focusing on minerals, mineral extraction, and mineral processing. In fact, my understanding is that Scott Woodard, who is the acting Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Transformation at the U.S. State Department, also referred to the partnerships that Trump is interested in at the mining endeavor this year. So how would that work? Because when Zelensky was in the U.S., he was there to also sign some kind of a minerals deal. But I imagine our industry is not only interested in mineral extraction, but the continent also wants projects that add value to the raw materials in order to boost even our own industrialization. So could that work for us, Tembisa? Having some kind of a minerals deal?
I think it could work, but importantly, we need to remember that we're not the only ones who have the essential minerals that the United States needs. We know, for example, that the United States has just signed a deal with the DRC in terms of the United States accessing all the minerals in its country, and they've got a lot in abundance. So while South Africa really does regard itself as important in this regard, I think the United States has a lot of other options. We know that the United States is sponsoring and busy constructing the Lopido Corridor railway line that will link up Zambia, Botswana, DRC, and Angola. So Angola is actually going to be one of the most important countries and ports that will be exporting minerals from this continent to the United States. So South Africa, again, has been left behind in this regard because of our stance on our foreign policy positions, which is not, by the way, wrong. I think South Africa took an important position, particularly when it comes to Israel. And we also have to insist on maintaining our relationship with Iran. We know that Steve Witkoff, who is the special envoy in the Middle East for the United States, is currently in Oman speaking with the Iranians, trying to mend relations. Donald Trump is quite happy and proud that he has initiated those discussions.
But they hate it when we have discussions with Iran.
Yeah, of course, he's got a problem with us having a relationship with Iran. But at the moment, we know that he's busy having discussions with Iran, and he's hoping to do business with Iran. He said that in front of Bibi Netanyahu when he visited United States some couple of days ago. So we have to understand again, which I think is very important, that Donald Trump is going to be in power for the next 3 years and a half. And after that, there's a life that will have to consider. And South Africa cannot afford to compromise its position. It has to take a firm but informed position when dealing with the United States without compromising basic principles, because Donald Trump is not going to be there forever in the United States. Of course, he's trying to extend his tenure. He's talking about the next tenure, which I don't think is going to succeed in doing.
He
But
said
we
there
need
are
to
other ways
understand
to
that
do
in the
it,
light of
and
that.
he said there are other ways to do it, and I'm considering that.
Indeed, but I don't think it's going to be successful. So our position has to take that into consideration, that we are a state that's governed by laws and adheres to international law and principles, and we need to stick to that. We must not change simply because we've got a bully at the White House who seeks to impose his own position on us.
Yeah. Dr. Matambo, your thoughts?
Yes, indeed. I'll just pick it up from where Prof. Fakude has left it. It is dangerously reductionist for us to think as if Donald Trump's interests in South Africa or wherever are purely material and that we can just appease him with minerals. I would actually say that diplomacy and Donald Trump's own personal interests are more or less at play here rather than what South Africa can offer. Because if you look at the United States' biggest traders, South Africa is nowhere near the top 5, for example. Even though obviously in South Africa, the United States is one of our biggest trading partners, both in imports and exports, certainly one of the top 5. So I don't think us appeasing them with the minerals that we have would appease the United would sufficiently mollify Donald Trump, because he has a lot of options when it comes to that as well. And then I think when it comes to the issue now, the last point where Prof. Fakude left off there is very salient there about the finitude of Donald Trump's presidency. You cannot compromise your principles, especially for a four-year term that Donald Trump will be in power. I think this is actually the problem that Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, even has with Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been very adamant that Putin listens to him and that if he tells Putin to stop the war, he can stop the war at any time. But Volodymyr Zelensky says, what happens though in the aftermath of the Trump presidency? We cannot just compromise everything that we have, cede our sovereignty, cede our foreign policy, because Donald Trump has a personal relationship with Russia, for example. So I think these are some of the things that in the long run, South Africa has to consider. That is why I insist on the fact that when it comes to certain principles, I think the South African government should not give any ground to that. But obviously, there are probably other avenues that can be explored in order to make sure that they pacify the United States. One of those things will probably have to listen to what exactly are those South Africans hardened against Donald Trump, telling it, because that will go to Donald Trump's personal interest and that will have more sway than whatever mineral or diplomatic recourse South Africa might have.
Let me go to some calls and then I'll bring in Peter in a moment. 011-883-0702. Tim, you're calling us from Brits. What are your thoughts? Hi.
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Clement. I was just thinking about the earlier comments that were made regarding the appointment of Mr. Jonas to be a special envoy. You know, one would have thought that, I don't know, I tend to be corrected. One would have thought that it's better to understand the lay of the land first by waiting for the ambassador from America to land, get to understand the lay of the land from the person in the country in South Africa before we send someone straight to America without understanding which doors are closed and which doors are open. That's just my view. I don't know what the other callers would think. Thank you.
All right. Tim, thank you so much. Let's hear from the others on the WhatsApp line. In fact, let me start with this text and then I'll get to that voice note. Tafara says, Clement, sending a compromised person like Jonas to the US is just playing straight into Donald Trump's hands. Trump is looking for and using, including lies, ways to force the ANC into changing its US unfriendly foreign policy choices, and nothing will improve till that happens.
Good morning, Clement, and good morning to all 702 listeners. Clement Sebastian here out of Addo Park. The one and only thing that I wouldn't like South Africa to compromise on is the court case in the ICJ. Because once we do that and we capitulate, then they're going to take everything else away. We are a sovereign state, so sorry, ne? Thanks, Clement. Great show. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Peter, let's talk a bit about China, because that there's a conversation that has been emerging about whether this is an opportunity for China to occupy that space. So how it responds even in this trade war, how it positions itself even as Trump then antagonizes even America's allies is going to be so crucial during this time. So just talk to us about the role of China in all of this. So beyond just the tariffs, like where is it now, and what opportunity does this moment present for China?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think China is seeing an opportunity to step into the vacuum, in a sense, that Trump is leaving by, withdrawing from international relations, antagonizing even allies like Europe and Canada and so on, and presenting itself as the good guy. I mean, in the sort of Western dialogue so far, in the Western discourse, it's been very much the opposite, and it's like, US and the West are the proponents of free trade and democracy and whatever. I mean, China cannot claim in any way to be a proponent of democracy, but it can claim to be a proponent of free trade. Okay, so it's retaliated to Trump with tariffs, but I think that is probably, they believe that will be seen as a retaliation and not something they initiated. So yes, and I've got a story in Daily Maverick today, a survey that was conducted amongst middle powers, experts in South Africa, India, Germany, and Brazil, and they're all seeing that the aggressive, you could call it the aggressive isolationism of Trump is driving countries towards China, also towards non-alignment, incidentally, which is a slightly interesting kind of dichotomy there. But yeah, I mean, clearly what Trump is doing has created an opportunity for China.
Yeah, and Tembisa, your thoughts on what opportunity this presents for China? I mean, we are seeing the dismantlement of just the international system. There's a global economic realignment here, and I know China has its own vision for the world, and putting that in place with the US as the major leading superpower is going to be difficult. So how do they rise up to this occasion? What opportunity does this moment present?
Well, I think this opportunity present it's immense opportunities to China. Firstly, China is hungry and willing to consume and import whatever goods and services that United States has since rejected because of its tariffs. South Africa, for example, has been getting calls. We hear from reliable sources from the time the United States imposed the tariffs of China, saying, please bring all those goods our way, particularly agricultural goods. What you're also going to be having is you're going to have China dominating, particularly on automobile, electric vehicles. We already know that China's market is becoming very big, and they're going to be exporting all of that to various countries that are looking at replacing the current automobile with electric vehicles. So China stands to benefit economically a lot. My only worry, of course, is this American exceptionalism that's been thrown out of the window. The country that has always been known for promoting and, condoning basic rights that all of us appreciate. Unfortunately, the current powers that be at the moment are not really keen on prioritizing that. And the United States for a very long time has been known as a country that promoted freedom of expression, freedom together and all those kind of things. But we see now all of that evaporating under Donald Trump. But overall, I think China is going to be the new leader in terms of economics around the world, and South Africa is going to strengthen its relationship with China because China is ready and willing to consume whatever it is that we're initially sending to the United States.
Yeah, and China, Dr. Matambo, has also been working hard. I mean, they've been sending their envoys. I saw they met with their counterparts in Japan, in South Korea, the European Union. And the message that it's preaching is that we need to work together against this unilateral bullying from the US. That's like the message that they're sending out. What are your thoughts on where China finds itself right now?
When it comes to trade and diplomacy, I think what is happening in the United States now is the best thing ever that China would have wished for, because it is now looking even more reliable. I had a discussion yesterday with friends. I was just giving them the sheer numbers of China's propaganda, especially on the African continent. I mean, Xinhua, which is a Chinese news agency, it has about 37 bureaus across Africa. In Kenya alone, Chinese media employ about 500 journalists. These are people who churn out a total of about 1,800 news items per month. So you can imagine, and also it is also China that is also involved in a lot of media training. African journalists, make a beeline to China on a yearly basis. So millions and millions of dollars are spent on burnishing China's reputation or China's image in Africa. But what is happening at the moment is that China does not even have to spend all those millions again for it to appear as a more reasonable or reliable partner whatsoever. It just doesn't have to be aggressive in terms of its pursuit of sovereignty over the South China Sea, for example, and the threats that have been surrounding Taiwan. It just has to sit back, play by the rules that the United States itself set, by the way, and China will look like the bigger person in the room. You alluded to the discussions that have been going on between the European Union and China's Foreign Affairs Ministry. We can also talk about the junket that President Xi Jinping has taken to Southeast Asia. These are countries, by the way, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Malaysia, that have been historically very uncomfortable about China's trade relations with them. But all of a sudden today we have seen that there is a change in rhetoric, so to say, a moderation of the uncertainties that they have against China. And that is not because of China's diplomatic success. It is just because America is kind of in a diplomatic meltdown at the moment.
Dr. Emmanuel Matambo, Tembisa Fakude, and Peter Fabricius, thanks to all of you for joining us for this chat on our Thursday dialogue. It's 8 minutes before 12.